want to talk about Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard is really important to me. I feel like I know him on a level that I can't even explain other than like a relative, a brother, a sister, a mother, a father. He has touched me in a way, and I'm sure he's done this to very many people. And I'm sure very many people have had the experience of walking and talking and being guided by Neville Goddard as I have in dreams. Neville passed away in 1972, and the stories around his passing are, whatever you want to believe. Some say it was suicide. Some say it was drinking and a combination of pills. I don't know, and I don't really care. That the man of the world does not really matter to me, or how he lived his life, or how he exited his world. What matters to me is the relationship I had with Neville Goddard. And as I said, I'm not the only one. I'm not sitting here bragging or boasting. I'm not the only one. I know that Neville has spoken to a lot of people, because Neville and God are one and the same. And when you're going through that seeking phase and looking for your instructor to help and guide you through your spiritual awakening, that instructor can be in the world and can be gone from the world. And your revelations and your mystical experiences that will unravel in you, that you will have, they will also introduce you to your spiritual guide if they are not in the world. And even if they are in the world, you may have a dream of your spiritual guide, because after all, it is only spirit recognizing spirit. And there's only ever one spirit, and that is God. So that is God recognizing God. Although recognition of the awakening God is not understood right away, but nonetheless, it is still that same thing that we call God, recognizing the God in another. That's why I say Neville and God are one. Now, to the Orthodox and to the Catholic and to the Jewish and Muslim and all of the organizations, religious organizations of the world, I know you don't agree with this. And I know that you are waiting on a historical God to come and save your asses. I get it. That's fine. This is not a shot at you guys. This is not a shot at anybody. I don't judge anyone, and I don't care what you do, and I don't care what your beliefs are, if you believe me or not. That's irrelevant. It doesn't matter to me. I know at some point or another, you will come to this place where very many of us are, and people are constantly awaking to and coming to. But you need a guide to help you through it. My guide was Neville Goddard. Let me tell you a story. In 2016, I decided I was going to get back into my writing. Once upon a time in my mid-20s and even into my up to my mid-30s, I really thought I wanted to write. And I did want to write. At one point, I had packed all my bags and everything, and I was heading to a school in Ireland for literature. I really wanted to learn about that creative writing, but from a literature perspective, from like the old cats that came before us, like the Dickinsons and the Brontes and the Stokers and the Shelleys. And I wanted to learn about that, because at that time I had started in the 90s, I should say, when this passion to write a book and to do something really took hold of me. I was dabbling with a lot of John Keats, reading a lot of John Keats, and I was reading a lot of William Blake. I didn't understand William Blake, and Neville Goddard, again, was one of these people that made me see what William Blake was and what William Blake was writing, and his poetry and his letters and whatnot. I didn't get it back then. All I knew back then was I wanted to write like these people, like these great giants. I wanted to write like them. And in the 21st century, or late 20th century, it still wasn't an acceptable form of writing. And I found obstacles with agents and publishing and whatnot. And a lot of people thought that I was writing nonsense, because I hadn't really had a proper grip of that literary style. And I was going from all of the books that I had read, all of the poetry that I was reading, and I was seeing how the literature was put together, and I was trying to do the same thing. But I had no education, no teaching in it. And I found a school back then in 1993 that was in Ireland that catered to creative writing, but in that old style of literature. And I really, like I said, packed my bags and everything, and I was on my way to go. And I had a spiritual awakening, had my spiritual awakening, my first one in 1994. And I came out to visit with my sister in British Columbia because I lived in Toronto, Ontario at the time in Canada. And I came to British Columbia, Canada to visit with my sister. And I ended up staying here for 3 years and discovering that I was not really capable or strong enough yet to accept the spiritual unfolding that was happening to me. And I caved and I gave in to everyone else around me who was condemning me, persecuting me, and telling me that spirituality is nonsense, it's wrong, and it's you shouldn't be going down there. We're waiting for a long-haired, hippie, bearded person to come back from 2,000 years ago, and he's going to take us off. You know, what are you talking about that this all takes place within you? And I couldn't handle that, but that showed me that I probably wouldn't have been able to handle the criticism that came along with the worldly sleep and amnesia and the programming of publishing and becoming a writer. So I probably wouldn't have been able to handle that criticism, which was a great lesson going through a spiritual awakening and thinking it is powerful and strong, and that power and that strength will carry you through to your greatest expectations. Literature and Charles Dickinson here, right? Great expectations. And I'm grateful for that. But it put a pause and a stop to my writing back in 1999, around 2000. It put a stop to my writing. I eliminated it and went back full-time to work and just lived in the world and had the occasional spiritual glimpse, but for the most part had completely done away with my first spiritual awakening. No thanks to the ignorance and the challenges that I was not able to rise above. And you will face those ignorances and those challenges, and they will be very much like Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Very much that is the world that will come against you and challenge you and tell you you are wrong and that you have sinned and you have done great evils and repent, 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 repent. Anyways, around 2016, I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to go back to my writing. Back in the day, I wanted to write fiction horror, and I was working on a vampire novel. I had a cousin of mine who was a great artist, and still is a great artist, but I had him draw up a sketch of a book for me, a cover that I had, and the book was called Bats Having Coffee. It was a metaphor for like late nights, engagements, and conversation, and whatnot, and exploring all sorts of things from the supernatural to the spiritual to whatnot, right? It was a metaphor, but it was a vampire book, and it was based on reality. It was based on a lot of things that I had gone through, being drained by so many people and whatnot, some of the challenges I had faced, but I couldn't complete it. Once I realized that, I actually believed back then, as you will in your first spiritual awakening, that everything you're doing is wrong. It is evil. It is demonic. It is diabolical and insensitive to the morality and the belief system of the world. So I found out that I wasn't strong enough for that. I think I should have known that because being a musician, I didn't really make it as a band, but I always felt really kind of uncomfortable playing my music around people. That's also an indication that I didn't have the confidence and the strength and the courage to play as a musician. And I often fumbled playing the guitar and learning songs. I thought I had a really terrible ear. And going to music stores where everyone gathered and played music in the music stores, I felt like I always froze up and was too shy and I was too afraid. And sometimes I was too afraid of the compliments I might get. Sometimes I was too afraid of being called out for not being a great guitar player, a great musician and whatnot. And I think that was an indication that I wasn't someone who was capable of handling publicity or any type of recognition or fame. But again, as I said, I'm thankful that that spiritual awakening came into my life and showed this to me before I went down a really dark, terrible road trying to figure it out on my own. So in 2016, I decided to write a book. And at the time, we had invested our love and our hearts and our passion in wolf dogs. And we had four wonderful wolf dogs. One is still with me to this day, although she's not a wolf dog. She's a pure Malamute. But I decided that instead of writing a stupid vampire book, I'm going to write a book about shape-shifting. And it was going to be about werewolf. And it's going to have witches in it. And it's going to have elements of magic and whatnot. And it's going to be a tribute to the hybrid species that I love so much, that means so much to me, that shared so much of their love to show me how much love we have in the world and are capable of. We really need to take a look at our pets and our animals and see how they love unconditionally and incorporate that in our lives. But it's easier said than done. And so I thought I was going to write this book. And I did write this book. And this book, I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I'm telling you, I probably have about a series in this book. It's tucked away here on my computer. It's tucked away on hard drives that I have. I emailed it to my sister, to my friends. I mean, I have access to this book that I think has the potential to be a series. But that's just me. I don't know what the publishing world thinks. I don't know what the agents think. I submitted it when I was done, and I got great reviews. And I also got a couple of horrible reviews. One company said to me, don't ever submit to us again. We're not interested in this trash. Another company said, we are not looking for this kind of material. Leave us alone. Do not send us this book again. But I think out of the 2 times that I submitted to publishers, and I worked with a couple of editors to edit it, and I found that editing was really pricey, really expensive. To edit a book properly, especially a book around 80,000 words, or 3 books around 80,000 words, it's going to cost you probably around $10,000 to $15,000 for each book to edit it properly and go back and forth. But I got some really, really good reviews. I probably submitted it 3 times, and I reached out to probably like around 250 agents. I'd say 90% of those agents gave me great feedback, but they also told me that this type of Stephen King genre is not what's happening in the world anymore. Young adult novels and young adult horror, that's what's really taking off and what publishers are looking for. They're not looking for that kind of literary and also imaginative and descriptive type of horror. They're looking for something young adultish, right? So I figured, okay, I get what you mean. I mean, you're looking for Twilight, you're looking for Hunger Games, you're looking for those kind of books, right? So I gave up. And then again, I gave up at the time when I was coming into my second spiritual awakening. And I kept hearing Dr. Wayne Dyer and Reverend Ike reference this ladder technique, climbing the ladder, going up the ladder, and then coming back down, going back up the ladder. I forget how it goes now, but in the beginning stages, I was listening to this, and it was from Neville Goddard. This was Neville Goddard's teaching. This is Neville Goddard's way of showing people how to use your imagination to create the life that you want and to manifest the things that you need in your life. But I didn't get it. And even when I had my awakening and my birth from above, where I had that revelation of finding a babe in swaddling clothes and confronting myself, who was all in white, and a majesty and majestic being that I am nowhere close to being in this world. I've already explained how beautiful that other side is and how beauty does not compare to what we think is beautiful here. And what we think is beautiful here is dead and lifeless. And she can be the most gorgeous woman in the world, dead and lifeless. He could be the most handsome man in the world, dead and lifeless, compared to the beauty that I have been privileged to see in my revelations and in my visions and my mystical experiences. That beauty of whatever you think of yourself in this world as being beautiful supersedes anything in this world. It can't even talk about it. But here I was going into my second spiritual awakening, having this revelation of the birth from above, but not hearing anyone speak about it. When I finally did get around to Neville, which was around the summer of 2018, I was still very passionate about that book I wrote. And I thought I would try one more time because now I understood the ladder technique. I had heard the lecture where Neville talked about the ladder technique, so I understood it. And I was working with an editor at that time. This was the second editor that I worked with, but this was my first submission to this editor, and I gave her upfront $5,000. It was $3,500 Canadian, but because she was in the United States, when we do the currency exchange and all that, it roughly comes out to $5,000, maybe a little bit over $5,000 or just a little under, but roughly around there. I had given her this money to start the editing process, and she said it would take 14 days. Anyways, in those 14 days, I did a deep dive into Neville Goddard. And then I started having experiences of seeing Neville. I still hadn't heard the birth from above. I had it happen, but I still hadn't heard the lecture of how it happened to Neville. So I hadn't come to that point yet, and I was still very much passionate about the book that I had written and wanted to submit and wanted to have published. And so I started some of these techniques, and one of them was the ladder technique. Imagining you're climbing up a ladder and whatnot. I forget how it goes now because it's irrelevant. I discovered that manifestation only takes like 3 to 5 seconds. You don't need a ladder technique, and you don't need to lock yourself away. And you don't need to do these kind of things. I'm not saying Neville's technique is wrong, but what Neville is doing is training you. He's giving you the training wheels to ride that bike you can't ride yet, and eventually you will take off the training wheels and be able to soar down the street. No problem. But I started seeing Neville appear to me in a dream. In one dream, we were at the base of a mountain, and there was about 4 or 5 of us gathered around. And Neville was almost like a tour guide, giving us a tour of this place. And he was speaking to us in biblical language. All of the people that I saw in my dream, I encountered through YouTube platforms. They were all speaking about Neville. There was 2 women and 3 men there, and I ended up finding them on YouTube shortly afterwards. You can call it that I foresaw that I would see these people, or I had a premonition. The dream was a premonition of bumping into these people. It doesn't matter. They were all students of Neville, and they all had a platform on YouTube, and they were all speaking about Neville. And I'm not going to name them. No. That is their business, what they do. I do know that, a couple of them strayed off the path. They're teaching different now. A couple of them no longer have their YouTube platform. It's the book of Acts. If it's meant from God, you can't fight against it. And if not, take a look at the other examples that came before that. They all ran off and couldn't do anything with it, right? So it's very similar. And the Bible, as I've said, plays out in our lives on a daily basis. The writers and the authors of the New Testament and the Bible were speaking about the world. And they were speaking about coming out of the world and the experiences they were having in the world and the challenges with spiritual awakening. That's what they were talking about, and that's what they had invested in to show us when we come to that moment that the world hasn't really changed. Pretty much the same. Therefore, you see the parallels with the writings of, the authors in the Bible, with the parallels in our lives that are very similar and symbolic in nature and almost identical. And that's how some people, like myself, have a spiritual awakening. We investigate the Bible and realize that all of this stuff is unfolding all around me, within me, everywhere, everything. So As I said, I'm not going to name these people. A couple of them are still on YouTube, and some of them have vanished, disappeared, and some of them have traveled down other roads, you know. But I found myself in a dream, and I was sitting in this dream with the editor who was editing my book at a table, and Neville was at the table with me. And Neville looks at me and he says, "Don't say anything. Just be calm and relax. Don't say anything." I said, "Okay." And this editor gets up from the table as she was reading through my notes and whatnot, and she gets up from the table and she grabs herself a ladder, and she puts the ladder against a kitchen cupboard, and she was trying to reach a light bulb to either turn on the light bulb or turn off the light bulb or change it or something. But all I know is that the room was brightly lit. It looked like it was lit up by 1,000 light bulbs. The light in the room was glorious and wonderful. But she grabs this ladder and she takes this and she puts it up against this cupboard in the kitchen, and she starts climbing the ladder. At that point, I couldn't take it anymore, and I started yelling at her. And I said, "What are you going to do? Are you going to finish my book or not? When are you going to complete my book? What do I have to do with this book?" And all the while, Neville is grabbing me by my arm here, as we're sitting next to each other together. And he's like, "Relax, relax. Just leave it alone. Let it be. It'll happen. Just let it be." But I didn't let it be. I yelled at her. I turned around. I yelled at Neville. I said, "You don't know what you're talking about. Look at her. She's on a ladder. What the hell does that have to do with editing my book? What does that have to do with editing my book?" And he was patient with me. I was yelling at him. I was yelling and, being rude and ignorant to him in this dream. And this lady was oblivious to what I was saying. She was even worse when it came to ignorance and rudeness than I was. She completely ignored anything I was saying, completely ignored the work that needed to be done with the editing of my manuscript, and completely was oblivious to, she just went up a ladder, came down the ladder, went up the ladder, put her hand towards the light bulb, came back down the ladder. And like I said, this room was lit up like 1,000 light bulbs were shining in this room. It was something else. And I finally blew my top. And where I blew my top and I was yelling at Neville and said, "This is ridiculous with your ladder and all of this nonsense. This is absolutely ridiculous." I ended up waking up. She had had my manuscript for 4 weeks. She told me it was going to be 14 days. She had it for 4 weeks. But when I woke up from my dream, I didn't think about how rude and ignorant I was. And I didn't think about my confrontation with Neville or the editor. I let it go because Neville told me let it go. So I let it go. I walked around for the next 4 weeks, patient, and didn't even hear a peep from the editor. She didn't even email me to suggest that she was still working on the piece. She didn't do anything. Finally, after nearly about 2.5 months, 3 months almost, I reached out to her and I said, "What is happening with my manuscript? Have you looked at it? Should I move on and find another editor? Is it too complicated? What is wrong with my manuscript?" She finally reaches back to me and she says, "Oh my God, I completely forgot about your manuscript. You sent it to me at a time when there was some difficulties and problems going on with my life." She goes, "I needed to make some changes, which would explain the ladder and whatnot in the dream. I needed to rearrange my life and figure things out, and I completely forgot about your manuscript." She says, "I can refund you the money," or she goes, "I can get right back to work at it." At this point, I had given up on publishing. Like I said, I had submitted to nearly 250 agents. They told me it wasn't worth it. I took one last chance on this editor. The previous editor that I worked with and spent almost $6,000 on thought that the book was magnificent, but thought that my vocabulary was too large in spots, and said that people won't understand what you're saying here. You need to correct this, correct that. It was a process, and I didn't have the time. I was dealing with a sick dog at the time. I was still going through some mental, psychological changes with the breakup and what happened in my life with losing my partner and whatnot. And at that time, I didn't have like the strength or the insight to dabble with going back and forth with an editor. Finally, this editor says to me, you know what, I'm sorry. A lot of changes in my life, and I had to do some rearranging, and I had to figure some things out, and things weren't really working the way I wanted them to. Now they seem to be on track and everything's okay. I can get back to your book. I said to her, no, it's okay. Forget it. And she turns around and she says to me, you are a genius when it comes to description. She goes, you know, you have a gift for describing things. I can see vividly and clearly your scenery, your interactions with people. I can be in the club that you're referring to, in the venue where the music is taking place. She goes, you put me there. She goes, I could see that in your writing. I said, yeah, I know. I said, that's a lot of reading. It's a lot of comic book. It's a lot of visualization. It's a lot of like, at that time I was in my 50s. I said, it's nearly like, 35, 40 years of reading and falling in love and being able to visualize the books that I'm reading. So I really appreciate the compliment. Thank you very much. But I said, you know what? I'm getting older and it's not important anymore for me to become something. I don't care about that. And although it would be wonderful to publish a book, I said, you know what? I'm not going to chase it anymore. I'm not a young man, and that's a young man's game and young woman's game, and I'm not into it anymore. So she ended up refunding me the money. But that was one of the very first dreams I had with Neville Goddard. And I wouldn't understand the importance of Neville Goddard until I had about 3 or 4 more dreams. And I would say from probably the end of the summer of 2018 to about January 2023, Neville Goddard always guided me and supported me in the strangest way through dreams, where we often fought with one another. And other times we sat together and he was a teacher teaching. And other times we walked together and we spoke and we talked about things in this world. And he asked me about my dogs and my family. And that relationship for some 3.5 years is going to be what will happen to you. Now, I don't know if it's going to be Neville Goddard. I don't know who it'll be, because the times that Neville wasn't around, I was experiencing David. I was experiencing Job. I was experiencing Jesus Christ. I was experiencing John the Baptist. I was experiencing Paul. I was experiencing the unfolding of the Bible in me. And Neville was more or less like a comforter. And that's what you truly are when you fully understand your spiritual nature. You have to be a guide and a comforter to others who are waking up and coming into it. Are you going to be the one for everyone? No, there's no such thing. There is no one for everyone. Someone will find their guide and resonate with the message they want, and that guide, whether he's alive or dead, will carry them through their spiritual awakening until that person gets to the point where they become the guide. They become the angel. They become the guide, the messenger, the guru. That's how it works. That's what heaven is all about. Helping others, uplifting your brothers and sisters, being there for them. Whether the world believes it or not, that you are experiencing a man who passed away some 50 years ago, it doesn't matter. What are you getting from the experience? That transformation that is taking place in you. It doesn't matter how it manifests. It doesn't matter how it's projected to you in the personification of someone who once was alive 50 years ago and now is guiding you through revelations and dreams. This will stop too. You're not a lunatic. You're not crazy. You don't have to think, well, hey, I'm spending my nights with a man that is dead. Like, I need to go see a psychiatrist. No, you don't. Wait it out. You'll know if it's a mental health condition, and you'll know if it's a spiritual condition, because spirituality is just an innate knowing of what is happening. And it's also the resonating of the message. That person touched you personally with that message. And more than likely, more often than not, it was through the experiences that person shared that really resonated with the same spiritual experiences you having that led you to the discovery of this person who will be your guide and your guru. So you're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. Like I said, you will know when you are having, say, a mental shortage. Let's put it that way. Or you will know when you are having a spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening is the knowing and personal confirmation and identification with your spiritual being that that is what you're having. It is an unmistakable, innate knowing that that is what's happening to you. A mental breakdown or a mental deficiency of some kind that requires the aid of a psychiatrist or a psychologist or medication of some kind will happen in the world, and it may lead you to a spiritual awakening. No one can say how it's going to happen. Sometimes traumatic events do lead to a spiritual awakening. If not, then you will seek out the help that you need to help you cope and get through. And all I can tell you is all of that is false. None of it is real. Yes, you are feeling the pain, the hurt. You are feeling the struggle with your mind and things that are taking place, emotions and feelings within you. But at the same time, you have to realize, and you'll know this and realize it when you come to a spiritual awakening, that it's not affecting you. It is not happening to you. You are perfect. There is no imperfection in you. There is no mental breakdown. There is no broken bones. There is no virus that can affect you. There is nothing that can touch you. In the world, though, you are experiencing that touch, that pain, that hurt, that feeling. But when you come to that spiritual awakening, you'll realize that that is part of the separation and the experience of separation. In all actuality, you are perfect, and perfect as perfect can be. So I want to talk a little bit about Neville Goddard, and I think this was a long enough talk about one of my very first spiritual experiences with Neville Goddard. There are very, very many more. Like I said, for a period of 3.5 years, Neville and I spent lots of times in the evenings together, and he guided me and helped me. And 80% of those times we fought. I was constantly fighting with him, arguing with him, and I realized that I was arguing with myself. And usually when I woke up from those moments, I realized what Neville was trying to show me by allowing me to argue and confront him and act this way was these are the things that I need to eliminate from my life. The need to fight every battle, the need to win every battle, the need to be right about every single thing, the need to be confrontational, the need to let go of the anger and all that built up frustration and all that negativity. So in the future, I'll tell you more about Neville and share some more stories where Neville and I hung out together and how he guided me and helped me through my second spiritual awakening. Because without him, to be honest with you, I wouldn't even understand what I went through a second time. And recognizing it probably would have been a long, long, long time into understanding that that is the second coming spoken of in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, and the mentioning so many places of a second appearance, and the comforter, comforting, bring to memory your first spiritual awakening and whatnot, and bringing you to this place that is known as the day of Jesus Christ. This is Nick. This is Tea Talk. I'll see you guys next time.